Hello and welcome to a new Oxygen XML webinar. My name is George Bina and I invited Stephen Higgs to present this webinar that will show you an overview of what's new in Oxygen 22. Stephen worked as a technical writer for Oxygen for about 6 years, and last year he moved to US. And he works now with ProSpring, and still involved in keeping our user guide up to date as part of ProSpring. So let's say, before we start, here it is some useful information. The frequently asked question that we receive all the time when we have a webinar is whether the webinar will be recorded or not. And the answer is yes. This webinar, as well as all other webinars, this webinar is recorded and the recording will be available shortly after the webinar ends on the event page, so the page that you use to register, as well as on our Oxygen XML YouTube channel. And the other frequently asked question is about questions. We have a dedicated questions and answers section at the end of the webinar, but you are welcome to ask questions at any time, because otherwise you may forget about them probably. And you can use either the questions panel in the GoToWebinar interface, or if you use Twitter, you can mark them to using the Oxygen XML hashtag, or address them to the Oxygen XML account so we can easily spot them. We'll try to respond to your questions as you ask them, but we will also we'll have them at the end in the question and answer section, and we will go through them and provide an answer for everyone. So yeah. So without further ado, let me give control to Stephen. Hello, Stephen.
Hello. How's it going in Romania, George?
Well, we moved to remote working for the last, I don't know, 1 month or so.
It's pretty much the same everywhere. Crazy times.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining in these crazy times. I guess we could say that maybe we're doing our part to offer a distraction for an hour or so during these crazy times. But anyway, as I'm sure all of you are aware, version 22 of the Oxygen suite of products was recently released. So we wanted to host a webinar that highlights some of the most interesting or requested new features and improvements. And this webinar will be a little different than what we usually do, in that it's not really tutorial based and it's not about a singular subject. There may be parts that don't specifically pertain to you, but hopefully even those parts will be at least insightful and interesting. And I'll be showing you a lot of things in this webinar. Some of them will be very quick, short, some of them longer, but we'll get started. So the agenda for today is I will show you highlights of what's new in Oxygen XML Editor 22, which also encompasses author and developer, depending on the actual features and document types. And I'll show you improvements for DITA authoring, the support for the new DITA-OT project file. I'll talk about some new products for DITA Publishing, and then other new features for HTML, JSON, Markdown, and more. And then I'll show you highlights of what's new in our two web-based products, Oxygen XML Web Author and Oxygen Content Fusion. And then, as George mentioned at the end, we'll have a session where George answers questions that were asked throughout the webinar. So let's get started. with DITA authoring improvements. So first, a new DITA perspective is now available, and basically it arranges the interface to display certain views and other components that are optimal for working with DITA projects. This feature is probably most helpful for those who are new to Oxygen, because most of us have probably already arranged the workspace to be exactly. So basically the new DITA perspective. Currently I'm in the editor perspective, and notice up here there's a DITA icon. There's several ways to reach it, but first I'll just click this icon, and you'll notice that it opens certain views that are specific to DITA. For example, the DITA Maps Manager and the DITA Reusable Components view, and just arranges the interface that, like I said, it's optimal for DITA. If I go back to editor, there's also another way. If I, actually, let's open this one. If I open a topic from the DITA Maps Manager, it'll show a prompt that explains what the DITA perspective is and asks me if I want to switch to it. And of course, I can check this option if I don't want to see this again. So those are several ways to reach the view. It's especially helpful for those new to Oxygen. Okay, moving on. There's now a new media tab in the DITA Reusable Components view, and you can configure working sets to include the folders where you store your media resources, and then they'll be displayed in the view. Actually, let's use this one for this. And you can easily insert references to them. So notice that the media tab is now here in the DITA Reusable Components view, but it's empty. So I need to configure working sets. So from this settings drop down, there's this option, configure working sets. I just need to add a new one. And all I'm going to do is add the folder where I have my images stored. And you'll see that it populates the view. And I can easily insert references to them by double clicking, or I can right click and choose insert as image reference, does the same thing. Or I can insert it as a link. If I can't really see the image very well and want to see a better preview, I can select preview and it'll open it in the image preview view. I can keep selecting others. So that's helpful. So this is just a very easy way to insert references to media resources. There's also a new DITA references view that shows all the outgoing references for a current topic. And it's provided as an add-on, but it's very simple to install. I would just go to help, install new add-ons, and I would select the default update site. And it'll discover all the add-ons available. It's this one. I just need to follow the on-screen instructions. And it says I need to apply the changes, so you must restart the application, which I don't want to do, so I'm just going to open a version that already has it installed. Here's the view, and this is a very large topic, and it has lots of outgoing references, and you see that they're grouped by type. So all these at the top are images. If I right click and select open resource, it'll open that image in the preview like before. For cross references, it should open the target, which it did. These are keys. So in this case, it should open the DITA map where the key is defined, which it did. And also notice that if I click an item in the view, it navigates to that item in the main editor, so they're synchronized. And if I put the cursor inside. Other ones, see that it's highlighted in the view. So these ones, again, this will go to the target. This is an external link, so it should open it in my default browser, which it did. So this is just another helpful view in Oxygen that you can use. Oops, it's here. To manage outgoing references. I'm sure there's a variety of ways to use this. One thing that I found helpful so far is for a topic like this that has lots of references, I can kind of use this view as a troubleshooting method to view everything, every reference, and I can look at the patterns and make sure that it looks legit. I don't need this version anymore, so I'll close it. Okay. Next. So in recent years, the master file support was improved to include features for DITA. So for example, we had the ability to rename or move resources while having the option to update all the references in the scope of the entire project, or whatever is included in your master files folder. I'll show you what I mean. So here's a small project, and I have this talking circles DITA map assigned as a master file. And here's the folder for this particular project. If I rename a resource, see I have this option to update all the references to it. And there's a preview panel that shows you exactly what's going to happen. So what's new in version 22? Now, if master file support is enabled and you trigger an action in the DITA Maps Manager to search for references to a particular resource, the scope of the operation will also include anything in the master files folder. So for example, if I search for references to this topic, it'll only show one for whatever is its reference in this DITA map. I go back to the project view, and I have this other DITA map in another folder that's not linked in any way to this one. I'll open it. You'll see that I just created this for demonstration purposes. It just has this one topic, and it has a link back to this topic that's in that other map that's not linked in any way. So if I add this map to the master files, and then go back and search for references, see that it found two this time. The reference in the current DITA map and the reference here. Next, there were more improvements added for the DITA map validate and check for completeness operation. So if I trigger this first option, if you use this batch validate reference DITA resources, the performance for it was improved. So hopefully if you use that option, you'll notice a difference. And notice that I have a lot of options that I have selected, and I use all of my condition sets, and there's a lot, probably like 15 or something like that. So this operation usually takes, I don't know, 5 or 6 minutes or maybe even more. So it's a very long process, and in the past I was stuck. I couldn't continue to work while this operation was processing. So I would only do it maybe once a day or something, but now you have this option to run in background. And it continues processing. You see in the bottom stripe down here, the progress. But I can continue to work. And this is a huge boost to productivity. What's interesting is, that, I mean, this seems like a very small feature, minuscule improvement, but sometimes these small improvements are the most impactful. So this one feature is probably my favorite new feature in Oxygen 22 because it's a huge boost to my productivity. I can run this operation as many times as I want, and I can continue working without it stopping my progress. So I find it very interesting. Okay, next. Some DITA-related options were added in the project level settings preferences page. And you can choose whether these settings are saved in the project configuration file, the XPR, or globally. So if I go to that page, it's this one. And these last three options are the new options. So I can choose to save the setting for the DITA root map. That's my map selected. It's the context here in the DITA Maps Manager, or the DITA media working sets. You saw me configure those earlier, or the settings in the validate and check for completeness dialog box. If any of these are enabled, then these settings will be saved in the configuration file, the XPR, and they can be shared with others. If it's not selected, then they're saved globally just for you on your machine. So that's something new. Next, for DITA map documents, there's an action in the toolbar that makes it very easy to insert a key definition, the keyword, or a variable. Let's open the, so here's a map that I have all my key definitions, and you'll see that I have a lot of them that are this exact structure. Key definition, I can triple click key definition with keyword, and you'll see that it's kind of a cumbersome structure. But in author mode, there's now this button here with the key icon, and I can easily, I don't know, maybe I'm adding in a new key for a new product. I would need to profile it, of course, but you see that it's added the entire structure. So it's just a easier way to insert variables. Okay, next I'll focus on the recently added support for the DITA-OT project file. And if you're not familiar with it, the concept is, it was introduced fairly recently in DITA-OT 3.4. And it was designed to offer an easy way to define publication projects with multiple deliveries and to produce desired output formats by applying the publishing engine over a single project file. And there are a variety of benefits to using this file. It's easier to work with than ANT build files. They can be defined in XML, JSON, or YAML, so it's beneficial for those that are familiar with a specific format. It provides simplified publishing using a single configuration file. You have possibilities for sharing and reusing the configurations, improved validation and content completion support, simple yet enhanced editing features, and I'll show you some of these. It enables you to analyze the impact of changes, and it's useful for translation since it's easy to see all the variations of a topic. So what I want to show you is the special support that was added in Oxygen for creating, editing, validating, and publishing these project configuration files. But before I show you how it was implemented in Oxygen, I want to draw your attention to some resources. And just so you know, the slides will be available when the webinar is published. So if you need to see the slide to see these resources, it will be available. The second one is just the specifications, the DITA-OT specifications, and this is the specific page where they talk about the project file. So it will provide more information. And then this other one, there's actually several presentations that were presented at DITA-OT Day last year. And you can also reach this from our website. you go to resources, videos, and all this. Oops. And it'll take me to the DITA-OT Day page that has a variety of presentations. And this was a presentation done by George, editing DITA Open Toolkit project files. But there was also another one right before his that is also related. This one was done by Jarno. He's the lead developer for DITA-OT. And he also talks about the concept of the DITA project file, DITA-OT project file. What I found interesting about his presentation is that he talks about the concept on kind of a high level and explains the features and structure of it, and just gives a kind of a general overview of it and provides history of how it evolved and whatnot. So it was interesting in that regards. And you only really need to watch the first 13 or 14 minutes, because after that he's talking about future plans. And then George's presentation, what I found very interesting about it is it takes those concepts that Jarno talked about and he expands on them. And then he explains how all of these features and concepts and parts of the project file was implemented in Oxygen. And in his presentation, George explains that it was set up as an entire framework. So it has many of the similar editing, validation, and publishing features that you're used to seeing in other defined frameworks. So I'll show you. If I go to the document type association page, you'll see that here's the framework for it. So it's defined just like others. It has a schema based on RelaxNG, has some CSS files for rendering in author mode, and so on. And guess I need to open it. And I need to go to our sample folder or project. In your installation directory, there is a sample folder that has a variety of different samples. And in the DITA folder, there's a mobile phone sample. And inside there, you'll find this mobile phone project file. This is an example of a DITA-OT project file. This is what it looks like. And you'll see at the top, it has a few contexts. This is one I added earlier. I'll delete it now. So both of them reference the same DITA map, but they each have a different reference DITA val file. And then down here are the deliverables. So each of the contexts. So for example, the X100 model context is defined both here and here. So there's 2 deliverables for that context and 2 deliverables for the other one. And if you want to create a new file from scratch, we have new document template in the new file wizard. So in DITA-OT project, and it just creates some basic structure, 1 context and 1 deliverable. And we have content completion and validation support, which is very helpful. So for example, I'll delete an ID ref, show you. Notice I have a validation error automatically as I type. And you see that it discovers the contexts that are available, that are defined up here in the top. And same with, for example, trans type. Could enter a new trans type. And notice that not only does it have validation, but it even has quick fixes. So I could use the quick fix to In this case, select the trans type. And you could also enter parameters. Gives me options for whatever parameters, whatnot. I don't know. And you can open them in author mode. This is what it looks like. Now this is set for view as YAML. There's 3 different styles. It's the compact mode. We have an edit mode. This is helpful. So it has some information buttons that provide more information for that particular element, and it has some inline edit widgets. So if I click this, I could, for example, add a new context, and it offers form control, so it makes it very easy to edit. And then the view as YAML is helpful for those that are more familiar with the YAML format. It doesn't change the file in any way. I mean, it's still the same XML file. This is just a CSS file that renders author mode. So it's rendering that XML file in a view that is more familiar for YAML users. I can also add that project file to my master files folder. And then let me open the DITA map. And now the DITA Maps Manager will detect the contexts from that project file. See, I can select them from here, and it'll automatically filter out the content that is not for that particular context. And you'll notice that in the profiling drop down that it's grayed out because you've selected it here. So, and there's also a couple built-in transformation scenarios. Oops, sorry, you have to do it on the file. There's this one that's for all deliverables, and if I select the one that's for select deliverables, I can choose which deliverable to use. I'll stop that because it'll take a while, and I'll move on. So again, if you're interested in exploring this further, I highly recommend that you watch those presentations and then maybe start trying it out for yourself using the sample that we have in the samples folder. So next, I'll introduce you to a few new products for DITA Publishing. The first is the Oxygen Publishing Engine, and basically it is a publishing package that offers support for transforming DITA content into various output formats, such as WebHelp, PDF, or EPUB. And it not only contains a DITA-OT distribution, but it also has all the Oxygen-specific publishing plugins already installed. And you can find more information about that on the product page for this product. And one thing I want to draw your attention to is what's called the Oxygen Styles Basket. There's a screenshot here. This is a web-based application that is available in this package. And basically you configure some properties, and then there's a preview that shows how the output will look based upon however you've configured it. So it's very helpful for easily changing the style of your output. And then the bottom of this page just kind of leads into the next introduction of a new product called Oxygen Feedback. And this exciting new product was originally designed to be an enhanced, more modern replacement for the old commenting component in WebHelp responsive output, but it is now more than that. Not only can you add it to your WebHelp output, but it can be added to any HTML-based web page. And in essence, it provides a simple way for your community to interact, offer feedback, has a modern, stylish look, and it's very easy to configure and integrate. And I'll show you how easy it is as I give you a little tour of it. Oh, it was there. So first off, I want to show you what it used to look like. This was the old commenting component in Web Help, and this is what auction and feedback looks like. So you see that it's looks a lot nicer. So to start showing you kind of a tour of this new product, I'm going to log in as a commenter, show you the commenter's perspective. This is kind of a fictitious user. And I can add a comment. Has some toolbar buttons. This is based on Markdown. So I could also just type it in Markdown. And you'll see that there's a preview pane down here that shows how it will look when I add it. And you'll see that it's in a state of waiting for approval. So there's an option in the configuration where you can decide whether all comments need to be approved or not. And I will show you that. From the drop down, there's a profile page where you can configure certain things. For example, you can add an avatar, change your name, password, and whatnot. I will actually log out of here. Oh. And now I'll log in as myself, as a real user. And I'm set as an administrator for the site, so I have the ability to moderate from here. I could, of course, reply or approve it, reject it. But I can also do that from the admin interface. If I click home from my drop-down, since I am an admin and I probably own some site configurations, it'll take me to the admin page. Admin interface. This is currently the landing spot. This shows all the current site configurations that either this avatar or icon shows who is the owner of the site configuration. And FYI, a new version will be released, I believe, next month. And one of the features of the new version is there will be a new dashboard page, which will be the new landing page, the initial landing site. And it's much more helpful than this. It has some statistics on it and various ways to reach different areas of the interface. But for now, this is where you land, and it's the sites page. And I'm going to quickly create a site, show you how easy it is. I'll create a site configuration. So it's basically a three-step wizard. I'll give it a name. And here's the option I was talking about. I can choose whether or not comments should be approved, or if they're all automatically approved. I can choose whether anonymous users are allowed. The next step, you specify the initial version. In most cases, you can leave it as 1.0, but in cases where, for example, for technical documentation where you release multiple versions, this is helpful, and you'll see this for a little later. I'll show you how this works. And then this is where you enter the base URL for your site, your website. And usually you're only going to need to enter one, but if, for example, say you have a mirror site, you could add a second one. So it could look something like this. And then if you have a second one, you can choose which one is going to be the default. I'll just remove it and continue. And then for actually adding it to your web help outputs or website, you have 3 options. You would choose this one if you're going to create the output using a transformation scenario in Oxygen, or if you're using a command script outside of Oxygen using the web help plugin, you would choose this option. Or if you just want to embed it in any HTML web page, you would choose this option and just copy the fragment and add it in your HTML code for your web page. I'll show you the Oxygen transformation version. Normally, I guess I could have them side by side, so I see this and Oxygen at once, but I can't do that in the webinar. So basically, I'm going to configure the transformation scenario, and there's a feedback tab there, and I will need this fragment to paste. So if I open the transformation scenario, about responsive, and you'll see that there's a feedback tab, and I would just paste that fragment here. And then I would configure the rest of the transformation scenario and apply it. I'll stop that again because it'll take forever. And we'll go back to the, so it's very easy to install and integrate. And here's my new site configuration. If I click it, it'll take me to that site configuration with other settings. I want to show you this real quick. So when you create a site configuration, as I mentioned, you're assigned as the owner, and the owner has a few more options that administrators or moderators don't have. For example, I can disable or delete. I'll go ahead, or you can transfer the site ownership. I'll go ahead and delete this because this was just a test anyway, prior to my password. And we'll look at a real configuration. So notice this one has pending comments. This is going to be the pending comment that I just added. And here it is. Takes me to this comments page. This is the page where you can moderate and view all the comments. So right now I have it filtered by just pending, and here I could approve or reject or whatever. And then I have these other filters. So if I filter by all, it's going to show all comments. And I have various actions depending on the state: reopen for resolved, can change an approved one to reject, or resolve, delete, so on. The community page shows all of your users. So anyone who has posted a comment will be listed here, as well as the site owner and any moderators or admins. And you can change roles. If I change a member to trusted, that means that if they post a comment, it's automatically approved. It doesn't have to wait for a moderator to approve it. And there's a stats page that just shows some information for page views and comments. I already showed you the general page. Versions, you'll see that, so for each, let's say, user guide, so each site configuration, we have multiple versions, and each one we could edit, and you'll see it this time. Once a site configuration is created, the versions page now has an extra option where you can choose to show the comments from all versions or just starting from a certain version. And you can choose to redeploy a certain version. The management team page is where you see all the admins, moderators, and the site owner. You can add some, for example, if I wanted to. I can't type. Wanted to make this person a moderator. for example. Now it'll say that a confirmation email is sent to that person and they'll need to approve that to actually be added. So that's kind of a tour of the admin interface. We're always continuing to improve it because it's a new product. So I'm excited to see the changes that will be public in a month or so. And there's also another feature I want to show you, and that is that you can pull the comments into Oxygen, kind of integrated into your Oxygen workflow. So there's a view called the Feedback Comments Manager, and this is contributed via an add-on. So you need to install the add-on. I've already done that. Speaking of add-ons, I want to draw your attention. I meant to mention this earlier, but in 1 week, next Wednesday, a colleague will present another webinar, and they'll go into extensive detail on several of the most interesting add-ons and whatnot that will extend the functionality of Oxygen. So I encourage you to join us again next week, and you'll see some very interesting add-ons other than what I've already showed you. So first thing I need to do in this Feedback Comments Manager is create a mapping. So I click Preferences, and I need to connect first. So I'm connecting to the server, and it's going to require that I authorize the connection. And then back in Oxygen, I need to create a mapping. So I select my DITA map. I root DITA map, and then discovers all the potential site base URLs. Just choose a more generic base for editor. And I'll apply. And it didn't pull comments yet because right now I have it filtered for current editor. But if I change this to context DITA map, it's going to pull all of the comments for that particular base URL and version, whatever I selected in the mapping, for the entire DITA map. And there's various options here. You can resolve a comment. If the comment is too large, more than 4 lines, you can click Show Comment to see the entire comment, and you can copy it from here. If I click the link up here, it'll open the actual topic in the output. Or I could, it doesn't matter, I'll just choose one of these. And now if I change this to current editor, it'll only show the comments that were added for this particular topic in the output. So this is very helpful for addressing comments. You can actually manage them directly from Oxygen without even going to the admin interface. So that's my little tour of Oxygen feedback. Some of these things that I've been showing, for example, the last one, the DITA-OT project file and Oxygen feedback, we could have an entire webinar just on those subjects and go through much more extensive details on it. But I just wanted to show you some glimpses of these new features, products, improvements, and whatnot. And there's one more DITA Publishing feature that I wanted to point out. Let's go back to Oxygen. So in recent years, this particular transformation scenario was added that allows you to transform a DITA map to PDF, and instead of using XSLFO processing, it's based on HTML5 and CSS styling. And a lot of people use this scenario, and now it's also possible to transform a single DITA topic. So you have the same exact transformation scenario just for a single topic. Anyway, it'll take a while, so again, I will move on. And the next section, I want to show you some of the highlights of various improvements for HTML documents. Our developers continue to work hard on making the HTML editing support to be as robust as with XHTML or other frameworks. And an example is content completion improvements. So I have an HTML file here, and notice that I have some embedded CSS properties. And so one of the content completion improvements is that it now even works for embedded CSS or JavaScript code. Next, code templates. Just like with other frameworks, you have some code templates. For example, maybe I want to insert a figure here. So it's an easy way to insert entire structure. Next, you have the ability to format and indent even, and it works on even for the embedded CSS and JavaScript. So here I'll kind of mess with the formatting. And then if I use the format indent button, see, notice that it even formats the embedded code. And there's a new action to minify or compress an HTML file. So you just right click anywhere in the editor and it's minify HTML, various options. And this is what it will look like after. Helpful for performance reasons. You can also search HTML documents using XPath, either in the tool. This is a very simple XPath expression. You can use the XPath toolbar up here. Oops. Or the XPath builder view. The same thing here. So that's a new feature for HTML. This next one isn't solely for HTML, but also for XSL, CSS, LESS, and other formats. But there's now an add-on that provides support for expanding Emmet abbreviations. And to show you that, actually, I need to go to our topic. If you're not familiar with Emmet, you could read about it in their documentation page. There's also various cheat sheets on the internet to help you. I'm going to just use an example from our topic. This is an example for HTML to show you how it works. Let's close these. Okay, so if I enter this abbreviation, now I could right click, and after installing the add-on, you have access to this Emmet submenu. So you have the option to either expand, or if I had a selection, I could wrap it with the abbreviation. But I could either select this to expand, or I could use Alt-Shift-E. You'll see that it expands that into this entire structure. So for those familiar with Emmet, it's a very nice feature. Also, you can now edit HTML in author mode. And this is even if it's not well formed. Notice that it has a warning up here. The HTML document is not XML well formed. And it says if it's modified, Oxygen will automatically convert it to proper XML structure. So to demonstrate this, I don't know, remove some quotes. And of course in HTML, that's fine. But if I switch to author mode and make any type of modification, if I go back to text mode, you see that it automatically added the quotes. So it's a way to kind of make the whole editing support at least nearly as robust as all the other frameworks. Next, some improvements for JSON users. Some more JSON tools were added. These are in the JSON Tools submenu, inside Tools. First one is for converting an XML schema document to a JSON schema. So it's this one, XSD to JSON schema. And if this was the first time I invoked the action, I would see a pop-up saying that it requires an add-on, but in this case, it provides a little wizard to help me install it. So it's even easier than installing the add-on as I showed you earlier. So all I need to do is specify an XML schema, and there we go. You can also generate a JSON schema based on a JSON instance. So let's find one. This one, I guess. There's various options here as well. So that encompasses these two. And then you also now have the ability to validate JSON documents against a schematron. And to do this, for example, I could configure a validation scenario. And I now have the option of JSON schema validator, and I can specify my, actually I want to do this on a normal JSON document, this one, because it actually has the correct schema associated. So I'll choose JSON schematron validator. I'll choose my schematron. Yeah, I'm already in the correct folder. And I can choose the phase. I'll just choose all. And you see that I have a bunch of validation errors and warnings. And the Markdown editor also received some improvements. First off, you see that it now supports lightweight DITA. There's an XDITA tab now. And you also have the ability to export as lightweight DITA. And you can also validate Markdown documents against schematron. This case is a little different than with JSON. You can configure it in an XML catalog mapping, or there's also an options page for Markdown. And here you can specify, you see that you have the option to validate HTML content. I have a schematron for that. Or for DITA content, and oh, my transformation scenario finally finished for that single topic. Anyway, you now see that after I validate it, shows some warnings information messages and errors. So that's another nice new feature. And one miscellaneous new feature that I want to show you, there's now an option in the auto correction preferences page. Show you that. It's this one. It's called Include Text Markup Corrections based on the current document type. And to show you what this means, so this is done through a configuration file, and there's a configuration file for the built-in frameworks. So for example, in DITA, if I type a hyphen followed by a space, it automatically converts it to a list with the list item. Or if I type note colon space, it converts it to a note element. So this means that you can create your own custom markup correction rules. I will show you what the configuration file looks like. Let's close these. So this is the one for DITA, and you see this is the prefix I used, and it inserts this structure, this markup structure. So you, like I said, you can create your own custom rules, and it's just a productivity improvement. Now I want to show you some of the new features in Oxygen XML Web Author. And the first one is that same feature that I just showed you. You also have the ability to do this in Web Author. So if I open a DITA topic in Web Author, I'll just enter the same exact codes that I just did. Again, you see that it inserts a list with a list item, entering note colon space, automatically inserts a note element. Next, when inserting a content reference or cross-reference, there's now a preview pane, and this makes it easier to make sure that you're selecting the right target. For example, I'll insert a cross-reference, I'll select a target, and you'll see that it now has a preview pane, just like in the regular editor or author. And it helps you make sure that you're selecting the correct target. There's a new CSS style for DITA topics. So if I go to this menu and then choose style, it's the very last one. It's called inline insertion actions. And with this style enabled, anytime you have an empty paragraph, if I delete this, I should, yeah, see, now you have this editing widget, and clicking it presents a menu where you can insert elements or a certain structure. So again, more editing productivity improvements. Similar to this same feature that I showed you earlier in editor, you have the ability in DITA maps to quickly insert a variable. Let's see, DITA map. Yeah, action is nearly identical to the one in the regular version. So, and I can, well, so again, very easy way to insert variables. Also, for DocBook users, it's now easier to reuse content. See if I have. Well, that one is fine. It's DocBook. So kind of similar to inserting cross-references or links, if I use the X include or insert a link, maybe I do need to use the other sample. Thought I had it open, but that's okay. I'll just choose it from here. DocBook, I'll open, say, this one. So again, see, I have a preview panel that makes it easier to select the correct target. And there were improvements for Markdown. Now there's a toolbar, so it makes it easier to insert certain Markdown structure instead of just the ability to type it. And last, I want to show you some of the new features for Oxygen Content Fusion. So you now have the ability to attach a DITA-val file to a task so that the content is filtered based on what's defined in the DITA-val. And then the content is grayed out when the reviewer opens the document. So it makes it easier for them to see the entire structure. So I'll add this one to the task, and I'm going to choose a specific condition set, which is based upon a DITA-val filter. Choose author. And actually this one doesn't have, let's find one that has, here we go. So you see that it's now filtered out. Part of the content is filtered out as well as in the DITA map. So if I add this to a task, you notice that it automatically detected the DITA-val from the condition set that I selected. And this means that even if I don't include the DITA map, now when I open this, it's not going to be able to resolve the keys. But it's still able to filter out the content so that the reviewer sees exactly what you want them to see. They see the context that this part is grayed out, filtered based upon the DITA-val. And for non-DITA files, there's now an option to automatically detect files that are referenced inside the attached documents, and those referenced files will automatically be included when uploading the task. So in this case, I for sure would not have the DITA Maps Manager open if I'm working with the DocBook document. So I'll add this one to the review task. And notice I now have this option. Actually, I have a better example. I'll add this one. And I have a preview that shows well, it should have, apparently I did something wrong. maybe I need to try this one. It's so frustrating that when it all works just fine until you're actually in the webinar, and then, okay, so notice in this case it shows not only the file, but this content that is referenced. So if I upload it, and you see that both files were included. And last, you also now have the ability to create a task directly in the browser. This is helpful for, say, reviewers or subject matter experts that don't have access to Oxygen. So I'll go to my tasks, and you see that there's a new task button. And I can add new files. I can create new files to add to it, basically. Give it a name. And I could add to it, save. If I go back to the task detail screen and I needed to retrieve the link for it, I could click this button and copy it, send this link to whoever I wanted to review the task. So basically you can do all that in the browser without ever going to Oxygen. But if you do have access to Oxygen, you'll notice that it's synchronized. So this new task that I just created in the browser is also listed here in my task manager view. And those were all the things I wanted to show you. I went a little bit over time. But I want to thank you for joining and listening. These were just some of the highlights of what's new in Oxygen version 22. I hope this was helpful. And I'll give controls back to George so that he can answer some of the questions that were asked throughout.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. We received quite a number of questions. So let me see. Oh my God. I think I managed to remove all the questions for some reason. Oh no. Okay, I have them. Sorry. One question was back to the DITA reusable components. If you can use editor variables when you define the working sets, like project directory, for example, and things like that. And the answer is yes. When you add the resource, you can add a folder, you can add a file, an option that says other, and in that other option will display a dialog where you can choose an editor variable, for example. So yeah, so when you say add resource, other, and you see that drop down, yeah, where you have the options to see the available editor variables and use them. So another, somebody spotted the EPPO prefix that is on some of the topics, and that comes from Mark Baker. Every page is page one. The idea that when you publish content on the web, people may find that through search engines, and they may land on any page. So you cannot basically assume that people know more about the context, and that maybe actually that topic they see, they may be the first page they land on your website. And Mark Baker also worked with us to help us with the user guide back a few years back. So that's why we have those prefixes there.
Yeah, here's an example.
Run in
Here.
background.
I think this topic was originally created by Mark, so you notice that that it starts with EPPO.
The run in background, there was a question whether that it's available also for finding files, for the finding files operation, and the answer is no, it's not available right now. I'm not sure it will be easy if that will run in background and you edit the files. You need to kind of take into account also possible conflicts. So it becomes a bit more difficult. So right now the find replacing files operation will actually it does not run in background, let's say. Is it possible to save options both on the project and global? The answer is yes. Of course, you can go on a preference page and check, save the option, you know, when the page is set to global options. So you can just set the option and click apply, for instance, and that will be saved in your user options, and then you can switch that preference page to project options and set the options that you want. Click apply again, and that will be stored in the XPR file, in the project file. And then everyone opening the same project file, if you use like a Git repository or Subversion or something like that, will receive that option as part of the project. But project options take precedence over user options.
And in case people aren't familiar, I wanted to point out, so you can go to this preferences page and click this button, and then you'll see all the preferences pages that we have set to project options. So all of these we've saved in our project file, and everyone who uses the project has the same options.
Yeah, and another thing is that our user guide that Stephen uses here is a public project on GitHub under Oxygen XML organization. The project is called User Guide, and you have an example basically of how we are using project level settings, for instance, and also how we are using DITA for Oxygen. What DITA-OT version is bundled with Oxygen 22.0 versus 22.1? The answer is that 22.0 comes with DITA-OT 3.4, while 21.1 with 3.3.1. Do I get anything using DITA-OT project file instead of XPR, Oxygen XML project files? The answer is no. DITA-OT project files are not a replacement for the Oxygen project files. Oxygen project files, as you noticed, they are useful to store options. They are useful to store the resources that you want to access, to perform different actions, maybe batch actions, to configure master files, and so on. While the DITA-OT project file provides basically a reusable resource that stores all the configuration for a DITA project. And that resource can be shared between different tools like Oxygen, a CMS, DITA Open Toolkit, and so on. It stores the good part is that it stores the configuration of your DITA project, all the route maps with the filters and publishing scenarios, or so it's in a way a replacement for transformation scenarios if you use the publishing part, and it gives the possibility to implement maybe things like cross-deliverable linking because you know all the possible configurations. It gives the yeah, and other maybe a better reporting for reuse, so you can really compute reuse or compute what you need to get to translation because you know all the possible configurations and so on. Then people didn't see exactly where you logged in for the feedback. So the hosted feedback server that that Stephen presented is available on feedback.oxygenxml.com, and Oxygen users will automatically benefit of a free 1-year plan for, I think it's one of the available subscription plans. You can start that for free for 1 year. With Oxygen feedback, will every user of the product be given a login to utilize, or would our company only receive one? It's every user has an account. And there were also questions about an LDAP support and whether this is hosted or available on premise. So right now it is available as a hosted version, but our plans is to provide soon an enterprise on-premise version that will provide also LDAP support.
By the way, George,
feedback, yes.
Notice that, so I just logged in as that fake user, let's say, and even they have the home option here, and that takes them to this page. And see, this user has no site configurations. It's not the admin or moderator for any, so they don't have any already configured sites. But so anyone can reach the admin page even from a topic in the output. They just need to choose home from the drop down after they create an account and log in.
Another question about the feedback. Will one site configuration be sufficient for multiple web help hosted on that site? Yes, you can use as if you define the base URL, let's say on a common ancestor, then you can see everything under a single site in feedback. So that's not it's possible. Actually, the feedback works with any HTML. So basically, from the web feedback point of view, there are just HTML pages in the end. You just need to provide as the base URL to be above the pages that you want those comments to be set on. Will the feedback comments be integrated in the XML web author? And could it be available with non-standard framework, like a non-DITA probably framework? The answer is basically the integration that we have is an add-on for the desktop version, but a similar add-on can be created also for the web author. Our SDK provides support for creating site views also for the web author, and many of our partners already provide, and we are providing a number of add-ons for the web author as well. So probably yes, in the future we'll provide also an add-on for the web author as well. And regarding using it with non-DITA, as I mentioned, it works with any HTML content. So if you have dogbook generated HTML or something else, that should also work. But then the integration plugin needs to know how to map the output back to the original source. Another question is about publishing. Can the published PDF show change bars of what area was updated from previous version of the DITA file? So in order to have that information, what possibilities to make changes from another version. Actually, also one of our partners, DITA XML, which provide a diff solution, they can compare, generate interact information. If you have files, it is possible to publish that as HTML and PDF, showing just how the track changes in the 3A to show also change bars. And I think this will be available in a couple of hours.
George, I think your connection is cutting out a little bit. We're hearing like every other word or something.
And you should be able to reach the location in the document by double clicking on an error message.
George, I think we have connection problems. We can't hear you.
Yeah, and you. Oh, now can you hear me?
Yeah, for a second, but it keeps cutting in and out.
Oh, actually, we are almost at the end of the questions that we received. So for the other questions that we didn't, we are not able to answer online, we will follow up maybe by email. So we'll try to, or can you hear me now?
It can now. Yeah, it's better now.
Okay. Is there a translation scenario document format other than PDF? I think you can generate a lot of different data. Begins to generate data to InDesign. You may generate Word and use a template to define how the styles will look like in the generated document. Yeah, so there are also other options. EPUB is also another format that may be generated from data. Okay, I think we are close to 1 hour and a half. So if there are any other questions that didn't get answered, we will look over them and follow up. Thank you, Stephen, and thanks everyone for joining us and staying a bit late. We should make sure probably to schedule the webinar a little longer so people can reserve a bit more time. Because we have so many exciting things, and it's difficult to keep track and squeeze everything in 1 hour. So thanks again, Stephen. We have, as Stephen mentioned, an upcoming, maybe you can go the Stephen. So we have
Go to the events page.
an upcoming webinar next week, same time. Add-ons. So because in this version we provided a few new add-ons and we updated So yeah, we'll cover that next week. Yep, this one. So hopefully you may join us also next week. And thanks again. Yeah, and take
Thanks,
care. Stay
everybody.
safe.
And sorry for the technical difficulties, but I guess since we're all working remotely, these things happen, and we'll continue to get better in the coming webinars now that we're all working in the same environment, I guess.
Goodbye.